Hello, students and parents, and welcome back to Dear Applicants, a show where we grant you with first-hand insights into the university admissions process. I'm your host, Jonathan, and with me today is Matthias, a Singaporean born and bred who went to RI and then attended the University of Pennsylvania on a SAF scholarship. Upon completing university, he came back to Singapore where he served in the Singapore Armed Forces, specifically in the Defense Cyber Organization. And upon finishing his bond, he took on the mantle, I'd say, of head of partnerships at DART, a cybersecurity consultancy and training company. He now works with us, IvyPrep, as a consultant and specializes in profile building in US university applications as well as scholarship applications. So thank you, Matthias, for joining us. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here and glad to be sharing with everyone whatever the questions you have for me.
Yeah, so I guess we could start off from the very beginning, I'd say, when we talk about good old Raffles Institution. How did you find your time there?
Sounds good. I love my time at Raffles. I think it was very formative. I spent 6 years there, 4 years in secondary school and 2 years in junior college. Made a lot of good friends. Actually, I was just saying 2 days ago, we're recording this just after Chinese New Year. So 2 days ago, we were just hanging out, a bunch of us. We actually had a class reunion. So even after 13 years of graduation, we're still hanging out. So
you're all a fairly close-knit group. I'm guessing a lot of your classmates went with you to Ivy Leagues and others to Oxbridge.
Actually from what I recall, I think 19 out of 20 of us actually went overseas for studies. In fact, some of them are actually working with me here at IvyPrep. So you might get to see them in the future in Dear Applicants podcast as well.
So long-term relationships indeed. So RI is still leading the charts, right, for students that are sent to Ivy Leagues and Oxbridge?
That's a great question. I hope so. I'm really not sure. I don't have the latest statistics. I'm sure.
I believe so. It's normally Hua Chong and RI swapping every other year. And I think it's RI this particular year. We're hoping all our RI kids get in as well.
Fingers crossed.
Continue that trend.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your time there. So you spent 6 years there. Were you in the integrated program or did you do...
Yeah, actually I was in the integrated program. So my year was the second year in which they did this. And also when the A-level switched to H2 and H3s and H1s, which I guess the kids these days, you may not know that before that they have S papers and whatnot. So
you're basically the same format that everybody today has.
Yeah, everybody today has.
And what were your subjects? Did you take an H3? Or?
Yeah, so in junior college, I did what we call HELM, History, Econs, Lit, and Math.
Okay.
And then with GP, and I did a H3 in History as well.
Wait, so H3 was in what?
History.
In History, okay. What did you actually have to do for that H3?
A
long time ago. So
this is a long time ago.
Remember,
So I wrote a research essay on Southeast Asian history. So specialized in, ASEAN and ASEAN's response to the Cambodia-Vietnam War as opposed to the Indonesia-Timor-Leste conflict. So just examining why there was a difference between the ASEAN's response in those two cases.
I am incredibly impressed that you remember exactly what you did. It's very, 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 very impressive.
There were many long nights spent working on the essay, so vaguely still remember the title.
I can imagine. And so straight A's, I'm guessing?
Actually, no. I didn't get straight A's, which statistically would put me below average in Raffles. I think in my year, there were about 50% or more than 50% of those who got 4 A's. So no, I didn't get straight A's. Actually, Lit, I got a B. And Chinese, unfortunately, I also got a B in. So, yep.
Wait, so nevertheless, really accomplished, right? And you got to UPenn, you got that SAF scholarship. How did you navigate around those grades? Because I think a lot of students see a B, or God forbid a C, as like this sort of, death knell. Is that the case, or are there ways to pad around that?
I think that's a great question. I don't think that's the end of the world. And for those you listening, A-levels is a really stressful time and stressful environment. So if you don't end up getting the grades that you desire, it's not the end of the world. I'd say even to these days, I mean, you are the first person in the last 5-10 years who asked me what my A-level grades were.
Okay.
So no, I didn't. In fact, I think when you apply for a scholarship, in those days and even more so today, grades are not everything. They really look at what you've done outside of school as well. How you are as a person, what your aspirations, your ambitions, your goals are, and I think they take all those into account. So I definitely know of many scholars my year and the year after me as well, and the year above me, who didn't get straight A's, who were not straight A students, but nonetheless had a very, very well-rounded profile.
Okay.
That PSC was looking out for.
Yeah, I apologize for that sort of on-the-nose question. It's an occupational hazard. But in any case, you were talking about a well-rounded profile.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. Were there any particular, well, obviously everybody has a CCA, but outside of that, were there any other activities that you took part in?
Yeah, so I was a little bit of an anomaly in both secondary school and junior college. So I wasn't particularly strong at any like specific area like sport or any CCA. So I joined a bunch of different CCAs. So in junior college, I was from cross country.
Okay.
Right. I was running, and I like to tell people, after 4 years of running, I decided to try my hand at something in the water.
Yeah.
So I went to sailing in junior college, but mostly also because there were a lot of DSAs coming in, so I knew I wasn't going to make the team. I just wasn't that fast enough. I just couldn't run fast enough. So I joined sailing in junior college. I continued debate in junior college, and I also took up this CCA called History and Strategic Affairs Society, HISSOP for short. Basically, it's Model UN, and we kind of organize, we participate in Model UN. So we role play, take on countries participating in the different UN assemblies. So General Assembly, Security Council, so on and so forth.
So it's a very fancy name for Model United Nations Club. But with your MUN organization, I'm not going to attempt to recite that entire the name of the club. But with the MUN club as well as with debate, did you participate in any competitions? Did you go for any meets is the wrong word, but I'd say conferences.
Yeah, so for sailing, there is a national schools competition, so we do take part in that. Obviously, I was a new joiner, so I didn't do terribly well with it, but as a team, we came in third, which was nice. Debate, there are plenty of debate competitions, including the national tournament. And for Model UN, we organized one, so Raffles Model UN is quite a famous one in the day at least. And then we also participated in multiple different Model UN organized by the different schools in Singapore.
Okay. Would you recommend participating in those kinds of activities to students nowadays? I mean, it's obviously not limited to humanities students, but it's highly likely that the humanities students do those kinds of activities instead of, say, Olympiads.
I think what it helped me, together with debate and Model UN, it helped me with public speaking, being more confident, and also just to find out a little bit more about the world. So during that time, I remember one of the issues that we debated passionately about was the Serbia-Kosovo conflict. So that was the issue at hand being discussed in the Model UN that we ran. So, you get to find out more about the world in general. I think that's certainly something that everybody should do a bit more of. Whether or not, scholarship or applications aside, it's just something that I think everybody should find out more about the world beyond our academic studies. I think it's something that I would definitely recommend.
Are there particular resources that you look at today?
Yeah.
That sort of keep you in touch with the world? I mean, I go the stereotypical way and just look at the New York Times in the morning.
I see. Yeah, I do New York Times. So I've tried to, because of my work experience, I've tried to gain a more balanced view. So the one example I always like to point out is I was actually in Oklahoma, specifically Lawton, in Fort Sill, training with the US artillery officers when Trump got elected in 2016.
Okay.
And if you know a bit about Oklahoma, you know that it's probably one of the most red states in the US. So I definitely got a very balanced view, if you like. Because coming from Penn, the prevailing view there is very liberal. So most of them support Democrat. In fact, I think Philadelphia in the 2016 or 2020 election was like one of the bluest city in Pennsylvania, right? So just to have more balanced view. So for me personally, so I used to, when I was in JC, I used to read Economist, New York Times, BBC. So very left-leaning publications. But these days I'm a bit more balanced. So I read Fox News as well.
Okay.
So beyond your usual gamut, Fox News, locally, I also follow Straits Times,
South China Morning Post.
South China Morning Post, even like, more other posts like The Independent, Wake Up Singapore, I do, just to get a balance view. Even like Hardware Zone, sometimes like to look through Hardware Zone to see, what other people are talking about, what people are talking about in general.
Okay.
So just to get a more balanced view, I think it's important.
Okay, so a wide reader back now as well as back then. Yeah. I think I'm sure you didn't have a lot of free time with your busy schedule, but did you have free time for one? And did you do anything in that time that you felt helped you develop personally or maybe even help your applications?
Ooh. I honestly, application-wise, I think most of what I did was in school. So with 3 CCAs and then, doing history and whatnot, I really didn't have much time outside of it. But whatever free time I had, actually, I spent playing a lot of other sports.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan. I mean, amateur, but big fan of table tennis, badminton. So I played a lot of those in my spare time with a couple of friends. Of course, back then I was also a very big gamer. So I'm going to sound really old saying this, but like Dota, before Dota 2 came out, MapleStory in its first edition, big fan of those. Spent countless hours doing that. StarCraft as well. So really old games, I guess, by today's standards, because people are playing like Mobile Legends, League of Legends, this sort of stuff.
I was definitely part of the FIFA, Call of Duty generation, but again, tons of friends that went down your route.
Yeah.
So I think maybe moving back to when you were in school and when you were applying to university, did you feel as though I guess a better way of putting it would, who formed your support network? Did you feel, were you supported by your university counselor? Were they supportive of your dreams of going to UPenn or other universities that you applied to?
Actually, friends form a big part of it, and teachers, of course. I have very, very good teachers. I was in the humanities program in Raffles, and the teachers were amazing, very, very helpful. In terms of university counselor, unfortunately, there were only, I think, a team of 2 or 3 university counselors to about 1,000 of us. So it didn't help. It also didn't help that I didn't score very well on my SATs. So when I went to the university counselor in my SATs, he told me I'm better off not applying to the US.
Okay.
Or, my reach school, I should just try for most other people's safety schools as my reach school. So most of my help came from a network of friends who were also applying to the US, network of teachers who were helping with like recommendations and whatnot.
You said, you're telling me to apply to certain safety schools in my reach. I don't want to listen to you. And you nevertheless applied to the Ivy Leagues. You ended up getting into quite a few. So it wasn't just UPenn, right?
Yeah, I did. So, I guess I was a bit of a rebel. I didn't really take, or at least I didn't let him like get me down, because sometimes university counselors are wrong. I mean, sometimes we are wrong, of course. But I thought, if I didn't try, the answer would have been no anyway, right? But at least if I tried, there's a very, very small percentage that I could get in. So I applied to, and generally I no longer recommend this strategy, but at that point in time, given my context, because I was going to NS, and I had 3 chances of applying, right? The year I graduate, the first year in NS, and then the second year in NS. So at that point in time, I only applied to reach schools. So I basically did Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Chicago, Cornell, and Penn.
You cast that net really wide.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And out of the 8 schools, I got into Cornell, Penn, and Chicago. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Oh, so quite a few. The Chicago, we'll get on Chicago in a minute because I know the essay prompts over there are pretty out of this world. But before that, I just did want to contextualize for any of our listeners or viewers that are not from Singapore or not Singaporean. Singaporean men have to serve national service for 2 years. And as a result, they have 3 different attempts to apply to university. So that's in their final year of high school or junior college, and then their first and second year of national service. So you didn't wait. You just applied in when you were in JC, right?
Yeah, I was applying for a scholarship as well at that point in time. So this was the SAF scholarship that you mentioned, among other scholarships. So if we had gotten a scholarship, the SAF scholarship, then I would have been able to disrupt. So I wouldn't have needed to serve my full-time national service. I could study first and then come back to serve it. So as a result, we needed to apply at the end of high school. For us. So that's why I actually applied, and I thought, there's no harm trying for all the good schools and see where it takes me, right? Because I still have 2 more years, exactly as you said. Yeah.
So you were employing a bold strategy at the time, but also I think it's worth pointing out that you run into a real traffic jam at the end of JC2, right? At the end of your at the end of junior college, because when you're applying to university, that time frame matches up exactly with your A-level exams. So how did you manage your time over there? That must have been a crazy time for you.
It was. So I actually didn't apply early to any school as a result because there were A-levels during that time in November. So it was difficult to meet the early deadline. But I did spend time after my A-levels were over, like basically the whole December was spent writing and doing up the applications. Not recommended. There was I should have started earlier, right? So the advice I give all the students I take now, start early, because you could always use more time. And so the last couple of days was really very hectic. You're right.
Okay.
Would not relieve that again. So definitely free advice to anyone out there applying. Don't keep it till December to do applications.
I'm guessing you and your network of friends were really busy those last few days, right? Reading each other's essays, proofreading things, making sure everything's good to go.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned before, some of those network friends, I mean, partly, in part, due to the bond we shared applying for the universities together in the last 1 month. Some of them are actually working here at IvyPrep and joining me in helping the future generations of students apply to university.
Okay, cool. So it's really going full circle. And would they help? I'm guessing they formed the bulk of your support system when you were applying for the scholarship as well?
Yeah, very much so. A lot of peers who were also applying for the scholarships. So actually we did our applications together. We did proofread our essays and of course
for the interview.
Prepare for the interview together. So interview prep was there were a lot of like current affairs questions. So it kind of helped to have a group of people to talk about these two.
Okay. And going back to your university applications, why did you settle on Penn at the end? Because you had listed out quite a number of universities. Why Penn?
Oh, that's a really good question. So actually it came down to really, really simple reason. So two reasons really. So I spoke to a lot of seniors who went to Cornell, Chicago, and Penn. And the overarching theme was that Chicago and Cornell were really cold. Like really, really cold, right? Like freezing cold. And Philadelphia was just a little bit better. So that was the first reason. And the second reason was
still windy as ever.
Yeah. Chicago is known as the windy city. So it is really cold. And having been there, it is really cold. At Penn, my senior told me that hey, he was very close to the city. So actually, if you ever bored, there are a lot of things to do in the city. So I took that, and then I just went to.
Was that something that was important to you? Location of the university, so you wanted to be closer to a city, closer to their city life, or?
I thought that coming from Singapore, I've never been to the US, so I didn't know what it was like. So I thought that coming from Singapore, having be at a city would be really helpful. In case I miss the city life and I'm not sure what to do with the suburban life.
And so never having been to the US before, what was that transition like when you moved over?
Ooh, there were a lot of stories that I can tell, but some of them are probably not for this podcast.
Sure. Any funny ones that are safe for work?
Ooh. I mean, so you know how people always say that like some American students would ask Singaporeans which part of China we're at.
Yeah.
I actually got asked that question and it was in a political science class, I remember. So not all that uncommon to be asked that. Also, just being able to live on your own independently, it was a challenge. It took a while. Kind of make all decisions yourself now. From simple things like doing your laundry, to like buying your own meals, cooking your own meals, deciding what to do with your allowance, where to travel, who to make friends with, what classes to take. Just very, very, very different, right? Because in JC, the classes are chosen, and then for the next 2 years, you take the same. You just carry on and follow through. But here, every semester is different, so you have to pick, and then you have to build a degree out of it, decide what you want to specialize in, and things like that. So certainly very, very challenging. Took a while to adjust to.
Yeah, the story that you just told us rang a bell with me, because I think it was a couple years ago in 2017 or 2018. I was on a summer exchange program in Spain.
Right.
And so we were basically studying Spanish in Sevilla. And I had walked into class and there were a bunch of Americans there from California. And so we were all making introductions and they were all from the same place. And I said, grew up in India, but I've been in Singapore for the past X number of years now. Right. And they all look at me and goes, oh yeah, that's in China, right? And I was like,
so
that hurts me.
It did. But and the other stereotype actually was that we're very good at math, right?
Are you?
Well, not me, but the other Singaporeans were really good at math. So I guess we did play a little bit into that stereotype. But I think whenever you're in an overseas country, in the US in this case, we're also representing Singapore.
Right.
So I think we did give a good name to Singapore by doing well in the math class. Well, the others did. I did all right, but the others did much
And I know
better.
that you were part of the Singaporean Society or Southeast Asian Society,
Yeah.
along with Petra, who was actually our first guest
Yes.
on this podcast. But so there is something really interesting that I want to get to about your time at Penn, and that's the fact that you graduated in 4 years with 4 degrees. Right? So 2 bachelor degrees and 2 master's degrees. What was going on there?
Okay, so yeah, I did have 2 bachelors and 2 masters. My bachelor's was in Bachelor of Arts in Politics, Philosophy and Economics. So that's from the College of Arts and Sciences. I have a Bachelor of Science in Econ, specializing in Operations Management from Wharton Business School. And then my master's was in Philosophy, and my another master's is in Computer and Information Technology. I didn't set out to do that. I set out wanting to do Politics, Philosophy, Economics, but along the way, I think that's the beauty of the US system, which we can talk about if you want. But along the way, I picked up other interests and thought I should widen my worldview and understand a little bit more about these other disciplines that I have no idea about, that I'm nonetheless interested in. So along the way, and thankfully, I was able to take the number of classes and have advisors who were nice enough,
Supportive
enough to let me take the classes and graduate with those degrees. Yeah.
But you just mentioned the beauty of the American system, as you put it, and I think that is something that's worth talking about, because it must have been quite a shift from your time in the Singaporean education system, which you were in your entire life, right? So why don't you tell me a little bit about how you found, or tell us a little bit about how you found that?
So the US system is very different from what you might have experienced in the Singapore system, which follows the British system, right? So in Singapore, you apply to university to do a specific course, like law, for example, like political science. You spend 4 years doing that. In the US, typically you don't decide what you want to do until the end of your second year. So for your degree, you don't decide what you want to do until the end of the second year. And then you can decide after that. So you do a bunch of general education requirements. So I could be a political science major, but still take math classes, science classes, just to get that broad-based exposure. So for me, in my case, I started out doing politics, philosophy, economics. And then after the first year, I applied to transfer to Wharton. So believe it or not, I actually didn't know about Wharton before joining until after I got there, and then realized it was a really good business school. So after my first year, I applied to transfer into a dual degree program. So Bachelor's of Arts from College of Arts and Sciences, and then Bachelor of Science from Wharton. And then after my second year, I decided that I wanted to really specialize in philosophy. That's something I'm really interested in. So I submatriculated into a Master's of Philosophy. And then in my last year, because in the third year, a lot of my friends were doing internships, and a lot of them were doing Silicon Valley internships. And I had no idea what they were doing. They were talking all this coding, computing, to me gibberish at that point in time. So I said, that's something I want to learn about, right? So I submatriculated again into the computer science masters at that point in time. So that's kind of how my journey went. Yeah.
Oh, so you're a real romantic. You didn't want to go to UPenn for the name, but rather the academic rigor and the slightly warmer weather. I admire that. But so it's really the flexibility then of the system that allowed you to major in things that were so far apart, right? Or master in things that were so far apart. So PPE on one hand, computer science on the other. Is that something that, do you feel as though you're the kind of person who sees something that may seem like gibberish and you really want to get to know it? Are you like that curious and driven to learn?
I was. I mean, to be really honest, I did PP because I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted. So I thought, 3 different disciplines in one degree. Yeah, why not, right?
Yeah.
So I tried it. And then really decided I like philosophy the most. So that's why I decided to go down that path.
Okay.
And Penn thankfully had a lot of American universities have this program where they call this process called submatriculation. It's uniquely available only in the US. So what that means is, halfway through your education, in my case, I'm doing PPE, I want to do philosophy, right? I can apply directly to the graduate philosophy department and do a philosophy master's without needing to go through the full application process. So in this case, specifically in this case, I needed to get 2 professors from the department to vouch for me, having taken one of their classes. So I did 2 graduate level philosophy classes, did well enough for them to say, okay, you can consider taking a philosophy master's, and then just apply to the university and good to go. So I don't actually need to take any of the graduate level standardized tests like GMAT or LSAT or what have you. So I could apply straight to it. So I did the same thing for the computer science one. They just were interested in my STEM GPA, and then with that I could get in. Yeah.
So cultivating relationships with your professors was also quite important in being able to submatriculate, right?
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of students may not know, that I think it is just a good idea to develop good relationships with the people that are teaching you, right? Whether it's teachers at RI or any JC in Singapore, international school for that matter, who are going to be writing your recommendation letters, and then ultimately even your professors at university. It helps, I guess, when you want to get involved in their research, as well as when you need their testimony when you're eventually applying to jobs afterwards, even though you didn't need that. You went straight into the army.
Yeah.
But getting back to your multiple degrees, were you constantly overloading?
Well, towards the end, I didn't do that great planning, as you can see based on the timeline. I picked up things along the way. So unfortunately, there were a couple of semesters where I actually had to take 8 classes.
8 classes in a semester?
Yeah, I had to take 8 classes. So the norm in the US, it's about 4 to 5 classes. And Singaporeans being Singaporeans tend to take 5, 6, and some 7. 8 is generally not recommended, but I had to do it so I could graduate. So the way it works is with 4 degrees, with 1 degree, you typically need about 32 to 36 classes. With 4 degrees, I needed close to about 70 classes. So in order to hit 70 classes, between placing out classes and getting credits for them, having some transfer credits from my A-levels, I also need to take more classes than most. So there were a couple of semesters where I took 8 classes. Not fun, would not recommend it.
And I mean, it's a mix of undergrad and postgrad level
classes. Yeah. So yes, there were definitely undergraduate classes. So even your freshman classes, but mixed in together with graduate philosophy classes. Very, very different. But I had a really good time. I mean, even though I was really busy doing 8 classes, I had a really, really good time. So, I mentioned I was in sailing in junior college. I actually joined sailing again in Penn. And I actually got to travel to really out of the way, like uncommonly gone to schools, just to compete there, for regattas, exactly, yeah. So I go there to compete over the weekend. So it's really fun. It was just a good way to get to know the US, not in the tourist way, but just a way to get to know the rest of the US.
Okay. Yeah. And just one last question about the degrees. What was the timeline like? Was it a step-by-step? Do you get one bachelor's first and the others, or was it all sort of in one go at the end? They just presented you with 4 scrolls and said congratulations.
Actually, they did present me with 4 scrolls at the end, so it was not step by step. And that's also, I guess, kind of the beauty of the American system. So off camera, I was just telling you that towards the end, my last couple of classes were actually freshman classes. So I was taking classes with people in their first year. Because the way the US does is, say, your requirements of 70 classes. In my case, if you take all 70 classes, then you will graduate with that number of degrees.
Right.
So I left out some classes right all the way to the end. Like I think my final class was Statistics 101. And before that, I was doing Management 100, which for the Wharton kids out there, you know what I mean. It's not a great class to take when you're a senior. It was not a great class to take in general, but certainly not a great class to take when you're a senior, surrounded by bright-eyed, very enthusiastic freshmen. So I actually, it wasn't one at a time. It was actually all given at once. And again, that's the beauty of the US system. You could do that. But I think in the UK or maybe even in Singapore, you would have to finish 1 degree. Or you have to, from the onset, apply to like a direct master's program, for example.
Yeah, I think it's quite a funny picture. The old and grizzled veteran Matthias sitting there amongst bright-eyed, starry-eyed freshmen from Management 100. On the topic of life at Penn, though, Petra's painted a really wonderful and colorful picture of the University of Pennsylvania. Apart from sailing, which you've talked a little bit about, how did you find your time there? What were you up to?
So I was very involved with fraternity. I was actually in a fraternity.
You in a frat?
Yeah,
I never would have guessed.
Yeah, but maybe I need to clarify. I wasn't in a social fraternity. I was in a professional fraternity. So this is a business fraternity.
What is a professional fraternity or business fraternity?
So social fraternity is typically what you see in the movies. That's the kind of fraternity that most people are used to.
Big beer kegs going in.
Yeah, big beer kegs, like crazy parties. That's all.
Which I'm sure there were tons of at UPenn anyway.
Yeah, not for this podcast.
Not for this podcast, sure.
So I was in a business fraternity. There were of course social fraternities, but I didn't join them. I was in a business fraternity. It's called Phi Gamma Nu. There are a lot of parties and there are a lot of the fun social stuff. But also it's very focused pre-professionally on business. So we also did case competitions, we networked with seniors, we brought in, companies to give talks. So there was a lot of focus on that as well, beyond just, the fun and things like that. And for those of you out there who don't know, there are actually 3 types of fraternities in the US, broadly speaking. The social one, which you see in
the movies,
the most popularized ones. The business one, the professional one. So it could be a business, could be a nursing fraternity, could be engineering fraternity. And then there are service ones. So these are the ones who get together to do community service. It's a very different type. Basically, a fraternity is just another term for community, right? So you have a community of people who are interested in specific areas, and they get together.
And did these guys form the bulk of your community, or?
Yeah, so most of them, and then of course they are the Singaporean community. So of course, whenever you miss home, we do like Chinese New Year gathering, Mooncake Festival, the like. We also put on a play once every 2 years. So I was actually starring in one of the plays.
What was the play?
It's called Sing City. So basically, it's really a good introduction for the university students to Singaporean life. So usually, we bring in the Singlish, we'll bring in stereotypes in Singapore. Actually, I think there might be a video online, but don't search for it. I wouldn't want. Yeah, I definitely don't want to see myself.
The first thing I'm going to search for after we finish recording. But you were talking about in talking about Singapore.
Yeah.
You eventually the party ended and you had to come back.
Yeah.
And you served your bond out in the Singapore Armed Forces, specifically with cybersecurity.
Yeah.
What was that like? How did you find your time there? Was a long time.
Yeah. So I spent 6 years in the military after coming back. I split my time about half and half between cybersecurity, which now has become a new service, the Digital and Intelligence Service, and the Army, which was where I was from. So I was an artillery officer by vocation, which is why I actually went back to the US to train with the artillery officers. Okay. So I spent about 3 years doing that and then 3 years in cybersecurity. I was in the Defense Cyber Organization, and we spent a good amount of time kind of building out the strategy, the plans to build up the new cybersecurity force in Singapore.
You were pretty involved in creating new cybersecurity schemes, right? When you were there.
Yeah. So there were 2 schemes that I can, I guess, publicly talk about since they have been publicized. So one of the scheme was the Cyber NSF scheme. So this is a scheme where we create a 3 or 4 year program for NSFs to serve as cybersecurity specialists, so they can contribute to our cybersecurity defense. So they go through studies with SIT, and they also serve concurrently operationally in units like Incident Response Unit and Security Operations Center units. There was one of them. The other one, which was more regular force, was called the C4X. So that's the Cyber Domain Expert. So people can sign up to the scheme to join the cybersecurity corps.
Okay. And did your time at university, all those multiple degrees, help at all, or was it again just your willingness and desire to continue learning, continue grasping new things?
So I wasn't cybersecurity trained. In fact, my favorite, as you might have already gotten from this podcast, was philosophy.
Right.
But because of my computer science background, I think somebody in the organization thought I would be well suited to join the cybersecurity organization. So actually, the cybersecurity part I picked up very much when I was on the job. So I went to take different certificates to learn a little bit more about the different domains of cybersecurity, and then that helped and informed my job. Because when I'm creating schemes, especially HR schemes, it helps to understand the technical knowledge and technical content, so they can identify the people who are going to come on board the scheme as well.
So you were assigned to cybersecurity. You didn't necessarily push for it?
No, I mean, they asked me if I wanted to join Defense Cyber Organization, and at that point in time, I didn't really know what it was. I just thought this was something cool. It's to build something new for the Singapore military. And I thought, hey, I love it. I love to build something new, join a new organization, learn something new. So I said yes, and I joined them.
Okay. And so cybersecurity outside of the Army has become a pretty big part of your career. Did your time there help you transition out of it?
Definitely to give me the foundations and the base to say, hey, I've done cybersecurity. I know a little bit about cybersecurity, and I can contribute to the wider cybersecurity community in Singapore and abroad. So yeah, I would say definitely. It definitely helped in giving me the foundations and equipping me with the right skills, the knowledge to transit to cybersecurity.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've obviously come a long, long way since RI. And I think during this podcast, we've not just covered a lot of topical ground, but chronologically, we've skipped forward about 13 years, right? You were telling me just before we started rolling.
Yeah.
And so after all that time, what made you circle back and get into the admissions arena? So what is it about university admissions that you're interested in? Because you've been doing it for a number of years now, right?
Actually, it never really left me, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
So once I finished my undergraduate degree, I wanted to give back to the community.
Okay.
I thought that, hey, obviously my time applying for it was stressful. There were a lot of things that I didn't know before applying. And of course, armed with like the experience and the knowledge of having just gone through Penn, I thought it'd be great to kind of give back to the next generation so that, well, one, so that they don't have to go through what I went through,
Right.
But also, to kind of boost the profile of Singapore in the US universities. Because whenever Singaporeans go to US universities, we are ambassadors of Singapore, right? So when the admissions officer look back and say, hey, how have the Singaporeans done at school here? We want to give a good impression. So I'm just trying to help the next generation of Singaporeans go there, give a good impression so that more Singaporeans in the future can also go to US universities if they so choose.
Okay. And is there anything you particularly love about working with students, or maybe a better way to phrase that is, is there anything particularly meaningful you find with working with students? Obviously, there is this greater idea of Singaporeans being ambassadors of their nation, and then you wanting to participate in sort of cultivating a new generation that is able to effectively, I'd say, portray a good image of the nation. But apart from that,
so the Singaporean bit was kind of how I started with, right? Along the way, of course, I've taken students who are not from Singapore, international school students here, students abroad as well. And I realized that I do really enjoy working with kids who are applying to university. If nothing else, I think it reminds me a little bit of when I was younger, when we're passionate,
rolling back the
idealistic, but also just to see the satisfaction of seeing them grow through the process, because the application process is one where, at least for the US, I think the student himself or herself have to be very introspective, really look back on what he or she has done, reflect deeply, pick a few key life moments and talk about them. So I think seeing that transformation when they first come to me and then after the process is done, I think that is really, really meaningful. And of course, sharing their joy or even heartbreak at times to when they apply to universities, I think, and the results comes out, I think that's something that I hold very dear. Something that I think I can definitely see myself doing for a long, long time to come.
Thanks, Matthias. That was wonderful. And again, it's just lovely to have you with us at IvyPrep as well. Before we wrap up, is there anything that I'm missing out, anything that you want to tell us, or perhaps tell the viewers, whether they're students or parents?
I guess the one thing maybe I would say to whoever's applying, I mean, presumably people watching this would be applying to universities or scholarships. It is a tough process, and I think it's only gotten tougher along the years. As more and more people want to study in the US or overseas for that matter. It is a very stressful period, both for students and parents. I just want to, hopefully everyone out there, you have some help doing it. If you have no help, definitely come find us. But at the same time, I think, regardless of what the result is, it doesn't define you as a person, right? If anything, it would build your life experiences and help you be a better person after that. So I always think the process is a good one. Sometimes the outcome may not be what we want, but I would say that just learn from it and then, just take that on the chin if it doesn't go the way you want it to go, and then just move on, and be a better person for it.
Yeah, and I think that if there's anything you've shown by, talking about that initial story where the university counselor was saying, maybe aim lower for your REIT schools, and then to go on to, defy his, I'd say, recommendations and ultimately go to UPenn and then have the, storied first stage of your career that you've had, I think is quite telling in and of itself, that you aren't defined by what people think of you or tell you. So that's a lovely message to end this podcast on. But again, thank you so much, Matthias, for being here today. It was a pleasure having you. And thank you, dear applicants, for joining us today. Join us next time as we continue to explore and unravel the university admissions arena. Have a lovely day.